assessment scheme has been carried out by principals and other heads of institutions, whereby different strategies and difficulties in executing the COVID-19 barrier measures in various institutions have been discussed in the littoral region. Some political actors still share conflicting points of view over the appointment of members of the Higher Judicial Council. What have been their take in this? Find out on tonight's edition of the Newscast. Nextel Communication Company workers have met with the Senior Divisional Officer for Vuri to discuss the issues on the strike and how they need to respect the labor code. Those are top stories. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us on the Primetime Newscast on Spectrum Television. I am Josephine Bindzi. The Senior Divisional Officer for Vuri, Benjamin Butu, met with some officials and disgruntled Nextel Telecommunication Company today as he calls the understanding of both parties and the importance of upholding requirements of the labor code and the aspirations of workers met. This comes days after some workers of Nextel aired their grievances over their poor working conditions. More with you, Catherine Kone.
After days of striking over unpaid salaries, election of staff representatives, reinstitution of paid vacation among others, top management of the telecommunication company Nextel, its staff, striking workers and workers' trade union met with the Senior Divisional Officer for Vuri, Benjamin Butu, today. The meeting is coming at a time when some workers of the telecommunication company Nextel took to the street demanding the amelioration of their working conditions. Top of the agenda was to look for ways to resolve the conflict between the management of Nextel and its disgruntled workers. Several decisions were arrived at during the peaceful encounter with the Senior Divisional Officer. He urged the angry workers to stop the wearing of black, the sit-in strike, and return to their offices so as to carry out their activities normally. Equally, cautioned both parties to work in compliance with the labor code of the country. After leaving the meeting with the Senior Divisional Officer for Vuri, some 50 protesting workers received sack letters, which was one of the issues prohibited by the SDO.
Qui était sur place, nous apprenons qu'il y a un huissier de justice qui est en train de leur servir des lettres de licenciement. Voilà exactement ce qui est en train de se passer.
It should be recalled that on June 11, 2020, some workers of the telecommunication company Nextel aired their grievances over their poor working conditions.
Principals and heads of institutions this day in the littoral region have attended a workshop session whereby they shared different experiences on optimizing the prevention of the coronavirus epidemic in their institutions. Crystal Asexwele reports.
This morning, principals and heads of schools under the supervision of the governor of the Littoral region, along with the regional delegate of health for Littoral and his team, came together as one in a workshop session to share and exchange their different experiences on how they are implementing the preventive measures put in place by the government to curb the spread of the virus in school milieu.
What has been done so far in the implementation of the barrier measures at the level of secondary school. That's why the governor of the Littoral called this workshop for us to see what has been done here and there.
During the workshop, the different school authorities took turns in explaining the different preventive measures they have in their schools and how they are being implemented. The regional delegate of health for Littoral was impressed at all the overall observations from all the different school authorities, as far as no cases of high temperature or fever has been noted in the region, which confirms that the preventive measures put in place in the schools are being respected.
Up to now, we have not had any information talking about students or teachers in our region that have been caught maybe with very high temperature, and that as soon as they were brought to hospital and received the test, that they have been tested positive. So we continue praying God first of all, and then we continue insisting at the level of the principal on the administrative staff and the teachers and even the parents to continue pushing the students and all the personnel to respect the barrier measures. That's the best way for us to tackle the coronavirus so that in the littoral and even all over our country, that coronavirus will not really enter the schools.
Nonetheless, it remains imperative to continue in this light so as to curb and curtail the coronavirus from spreading into school milieus.
Inhabitants of Kanyabasi continue to disrespect some barrier measures despite the dangers of the COVID-19 pandemic. Sensitization efforts from leaders of the Nigerian community on social distancing and washing of hands are falling on deaf ears.
What about the breakout of this pandemic called COVID-19? So we have a various village meeting or family meeting, but we call general meeting to sanitize and inform the people on the dangers of this very pandemic.
A message from one of the leaders of the Nigerian community here in Douala at Camp Yabasi, which is not being taken seriously. On a visit to this area notorious for the selling of motor spare parts, one gets the feeling that the coronavirus pandemic is over and life has returned to normal.
That's very good question.
It is business as usual, with very few persons seen respecting barrier measures against the killer virus which is ravaging through the world. The watchword here seems not to be prevention, but sales. Clients, like sellers, are grouped together with no face mask on nor the respect of social distancing, despite warnings from their leaders.
Yes, public distance is really a problem in this our market, because what contact is what is involved in our market. But we have also tell our people that since it's very difficult to make the social distance a possibility, but she should do everything possible to be wearing these face masks, because it's a part of the strategy put in place to curtail the spread of the pandemic.
Located in the Douala 2 municipality, which is said to be one of the risk zones for this outbreak, some measures have, however, been put in place to propagate the spread of this virus.
Here in our business place, we have provided this bucket and soap and sanitizers nearly every 20 meters. Every 20 meters, we have provided them for our people to be washing their hands from time to time and using the hand sanitizer to protect themselves.
Even though they attest no COVID-19 case has been recorded in this area, the fear of this outbreak remains a reality at Camp Yabasi, here in the country's economic capital.
Medical personnel are at high risk of contaminating the COVID-19 virus as they share closer contact with patients. Oni Ladonet in the following report speaks to Dr. Roger Etoile, who explains how medical personnel are dealing with stress.
Despite being the crisis management personnel, these brave soldiers are not immune to the psychological and physical health threats brought in by the novel coronavirus. The need to protect and attend to every patient during this period of the COVID-19 exposes frontline workers to various health conditions like stress. Firstly, stress associated to the pandemic. It's a new pandemic with some frightening information about it. So, it provokes stress, especially with the absence of a solution, be it in relation to a vaccine or specific treatment. The sudden reversal of role from front-line worker to patient leads to frustration and helplessness. We also have psychological impact that we have to look into, because we have days where a doctor can turn from a medical personnel to a sick person. In addition, the continuous increase in the number of confirmed cases poses a huge threat to the medical body.
Le troisième problème psychologique est notamment lié à la charge de travail que génère.
The third psychological problem is related to the workload done when taking care of a COVID-19 patient. We have long tiring days and lots of pressure which wears out medical personnel, both psychologically and physically.
Avec toute la pression qu'il y a tout autour, épuise psychologiquement mais aussi physiquement les personnels de santé.
In order to avoid all these health hazards, medical experts advise
il faut savoir bien organiser son travail en alternant.
One has to know how to organize his work, putting into consideration work and rest hours, adopting hygienic principles, eating healthy, having a good rest, and organize teamwork so as to reduce the workload and further have some extracurricular activities.
Il faut avoir des activités exutoires.
Preventive measures are overemphasized during this period so as to tackle the coronavirus.
And now we talk pregnant women and the coronavirus. Pregnant women receive special attention if at all they present signs of the COVID-19 virus. Monitoring their day-to-day habits of the mother is the utmost task of health personnel, especially when dealing with the COVID-19 virus. John Paul Sama has details.
Pregnant women tested positive for the coronavirus are treated like any other patient, but with a certain degree of care put into their case.
They are taken care of as all the other patients, but now there will be specific measures concerning their pregnancy. It means that because a pregnant patient has two people, if you can say so. So there is the mother and there is the baby. So in addition, taking care of the mother, we are also taking care of the baby by monitoring the fetal heartbeat of the baby. If the patient is still pregnant, we are going to monitor the fetal heartbeat of the baby regularly, like 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, depending on the condition, depending on the type of patient that we have in front of us. And we are also going to do a vaginal examination, that is to monitor if the patient is in labor or not.
Having the dreaded virus doesn't automatically mean that the child they are carrying is also infected, as early studies have shown.
The studies that we have, actually it is not documented. So the few studies that have been done elsewhere, abroad, because it should be noted that here we are still during studies, the studies are still under investigation. So the data that we have do not mention any presence of the virus either in the amniotic fluid of the fetus, or in the vaginal fluid of the mother, or in the breast milk. So actually, with the data that we have, we can say that it is not probable that a mother who is infected will transmit the virus to her baby.
Cameroon has recorded 2 cases of birth by COVID-19 patients in Yaoundé, which all turned out successful, with certain precautions taken to prevent the child from being contaminated.
Depending on the condition of the baby, it means if the baby is a premature baby, it is a preterm baby, we are going to put him under an incubator. Like the first baby that we had was a premature baby, so he was supposed to be put under, so we have put him under an incubator because he was still a small baby. But for now, for the second baby that we have, if it's the term baby, the baby can be with the mother. It is advised that the mother and the baby stay in the same room, but that room should be an isolated room. And there should be a distance between the mother and the baby. That is, the baby crib should be placed at least 1 meter or 1.5 meter apart from the mother. And when the mother wants to nurse the baby, she has to do her regular hygiene, that is, she has to take care to wash her hands with soap and water, and she has to put on a face mask that is going to limit the transmission or to avoid the transmission of the droplets from her to her baby.
The hospitals in charge of taking care of coronavirus patients also make sure a quick test is carried out on all babies to check the state of their health situations.
Today, June 16, the Administrative Tribunal in Yaoundé recognizes Edith Kabangwala, the legitimate president of the Cameroon's People Party. This decision is the outcome of an illegal act and abuse of power of the 20th of July 2018 by the head of the CPP Party, Mr. Titafon Samuel, founder and former member. This has been signed by Frank Essi, Secretary General of the CPP Party, accusing the Minister of Territorial Administration of being incapable. Following several flares of rumors claiming the death of the head of state, some political actors hold the assertion that the president is alive following the appointment of members of the Higher Judicial Council. Reactions from these political and judicial actors with you, Catherine Kone.
Following the appointment of substantive and alternate members of the Judicial Council, some political actors say it is a proof that President Paul Biya is alive and still active in power.
Those people who made it a means of livelihood to maintain continuously and lamentably that President Paul Biya is dead and there should be, and there is vacancy at the head of the state, should have a rethink, because the Higher Judicial Council is a council that is headed personally, presided personally by the President of the Republic. So if he appoints members of the Higher Judicial Council, he is definitely going to chair that council, and we are going to see him live chairing the council and appointing magistrates, promoting them, and sanctioning, meting out disciplinary sanctions to them. So it's a clear proof that this man is not dead, he is alive, and he is exercising his functions of President of the Republic.
Other political actors have expressed dissatisfaction to the decree and describe it to be
it is but a usual and normal news for us to hear that President Bobby have appointed persons at the Higher Judicial Council without consulting a bar council or even with the consent of people that manage the judicial arm of the government. It is his method of rule. Now, the President of the Republic has never been a consultative man. Everything centers around him. He takes the decision of who he appoints and who he sends to jail. And I think this appointment once again comes to tell us Cameroonians that we are in a government that does not concern us. We are in the social contract that our own side of the contract is not respected, because there is no government in the world where everything is centered around one person and they call it democracy. I would say we are democratic. It is absolute monarchy.
Them, the law does state the solemn appointment of members of the Higher Judicial Council by President Paul Biya needs an urgent review.
Well, my only regret is that during the appointment, for example, like the Cameroon bar wasn't consulted. You see that the consultation is being made only with the National Assembly and the Supreme Court, whereas the Supreme Court to me doesn't really represent all the actors in the judiciary. I think that it would have been fair or judicious that the Cameroon bar as well is consulted for issues that have to touch on the magistracy. I think that's the only regret that I have with respect to.
The nomination is coming at a time when debates surrounding a possible constitution amendment are rife.
Well, that is what the French people, they completely agree. I think that these kind of arrangements to change power from one republic to another without the consent of the people is what we really stand against, because we members of the Popular Action Party, with our passion of support from the Northwest and Southwest, is not going to be part of any constitutional arrangement to continue putting us into another monarchical regime after the stability continuity of the CPDM reign.
President Paul Biya Monday signed a decree appointing some members of the country's higher judicial council for a 5-year term.
Close to 4 years since the beginning of the Anglophone crisis, more than 2,000 families have gone homeless, with about 1,200 children caught in the web of education as a result of violent clashes between separatist fighters and the military. The United Nations looks back at the ongoing Anglophone crisis in the English-speaking regions 3 years on. With you, Crystal Asexwele.
The Anglophone crisis conflict triggered by a violent crackdown on 2016-2017 in the English-speaking Northwest and Southwest regions of Cameroon. According to the United Nations, the security situation and living conditions continue to crumble due to the 3-year conflict between the government and armed groups. These conflicts cause a lot of suffering to families living in these regions. The conflict has killed at least 1,850 people since September 2017 and has now spread to the Francophone West and Littoral regions. It has had a substantial social and humanitarian impact in the Anglophone regions. Most schools have been closed for the last 2 years. More than 170 villages have been destroyed. 530,000 people have been internally displaced and 35,000 have sought refuge in neighboring Nigeria. The conflict has also devastated the local economy, which accounts for about 1/5 of the country's GDP. The United Nations warned that Cameroon has become one of the fastest growing displacement crises in Africa and that the security and humanitarian situations are deteriorating, spiraling out of control. From 2018, the Anglophone crisis drew increasing international attention and became a challenge to Cameroon's foreign relations. Many countries put pressure on Cameroon to talk to the separatists, while African countries remained silent on the issue. In May 2019, an informal discussion was held at the United Nations Security Council, this after nearly 2 years of little international involvement. Speaking impartially on the Anglophone crisis situation in Cameroon, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, says there is still a window of opportunity to end the crisis, but the Cameroonian government has to take decisive actions to win the trust of the population in the southwest and northwest regions of Cameroon.
On our international page, the Black Lives Matter protests that have erupted across the world in recent weeks have recognized demands in Europe for statutes of slave traders and colonial figures to be removed. A memorial to Cecil Rhodes at Oxford University is a focal point of protest, most especially in Britain. Details with the VOA.
One of Britain's most prestigious institutions, now at the centre of the fierce debate over the country's colonial past. Thousands of people protested outside Oxford University's Oriel College in recent days beneath a statue of Cecil Rhodes, who was a 19th century British mining magnate and politician in southern Africa. This protester declined to give his name.
How can you celebrate the colonialism of African countries? How can you celebrate the destruction of African countries? How can you celebrate stealing from African countries?
Rhodes founded the De Beers Diamond Empire and gave his name to Rhodesia under the British Empire, present-day Zimbabwe. His policy on racial segregation was the forerunner of apartheid.
He laid the foundations of the skewed labor systems that we see, the seizure of lands, particularly in South Africa, and more precisely in Zimbabwe, contemporary Zimbabwe and Zambia. That is nothing worthy of celebration, irrespective of the fact that subsequently his bequeathment has gone to Oxford University for purposes of setting up educational scholarships.
Close to 200,000 people have signed a petition calling for the statue's removal, and the campaign is backed by 26 Oxford City councillors who say it is incompatible with the city's commitment to anti-racism. Oriel College issued a statement saying, "We believe Black Lives Matter and support the right to peaceful protest." One Oxford historian says demands for the statue's removal are simplistic.
I think that one has to be very careful with questions like this, not to just pick out a single individual, because the whole empire, all of Britain, universities, cities, industry was all built on materials, resources and wealth taken from other parts of the world.
The University of Cape Town in South Africa removed a statue of Cecil Rhodes in 2016 after months of demonstrations. The Rhodes Must Fall campaign was mirrored in Oxford at the time, but the Oriel College statue remained in its place. The Black Lives Matter protests in the wake of the death of George Floyd in police custody last month in the US have sparked fierce debate in Europe over racism, colonialism and slavery. Far-right protesters clashed with police Saturday in London. They had travelled to the capital to, in their words, defend the statues. Across Britain, memorials have been boarded up, including a statue of Winston Churchill outside Parliament, which was defaced earlier this month. The statues are at the centre of a cultural battle that is spilling onto the streets and becoming increasingly violent. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
It is on that note that we close the curtains for the news tonight. Thanks for watching us. Take another rendezvous in the French language at 8 p.m. with René Nassis Moto. From our team and us, is stay safe and good night.